Welcome everyone. We're going to be looking at the readings for the fifth Sunday in Lent, and that was for Sunday, the 21st of March. Hard to believe we're moving right along through March, and let's jump into our first reading. As many of you know, we're using an adult faith formation program here called Connections, and part of Connections is people getting in a small group and reflecting on the readings from the previous Sunday, and then on their own reflecting on those readings as well. And there's always a little background to the first reading we hear at Mass and the second reading that we hear at the Sunday Mass. So this is the information that we're going to hear in the Connections program. Jeremiah, in the first reading, prophesies that one day God will make a new covenant with His chosen people. This covenant will be different than the one God made earlier with His people and Moses. Great. In that covenant, God's law was written on stone tablets. But in this new covenant, God's law is going to be written on something else. This is the only passage in the entire Old Testament where a new covenant is explicitly mentioned. So it's kind of an interesting passage. We believe as Christians that that new covenant is ultimately fulfilled in Jesus Christ. And that's why the first reading was chosen for this weekend, because it connects with the gospel. So let's take a look at a reading from the book of the prophet Jeremiah. The days are coming, says the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and the house of Judah. It will not be like the covenant I made with their fathers, the day I took them by the hand to lead them forth from the land of Egypt. For they broke my covenant, and I had to show them their master, says the Lord. But this is the covenant I will make with them, with the house of Israel, in those days, says the Lord. I will place my law within them and write it on their hearts. I will be their God, and they shall be my people. No longer will they need to teach their friends and their relatives how to know the Lord. All, from the least to the greatest, shall know me, says the Lord. For I will forgive their evil doing and remember their sin no more. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. So I grew up in Northeast Philadelphia in St. Helena's Parish in the Olney section of Philadelphia. And, we were street kids. So we played stickball. When I was growing up, I played baseball, played a little football, played basketball. And then when I went to high school, I probably should have started to run, but I didn't. In my junior and senior year, this street kid decided to try out for this sport called wrestling. I was a terrible wrestler. I was just a tall, skinny kid trying to wrestle. And I'd never wrestled in my life before. Jack Sells was our coach, and some people on the team were really good wrestlers, Tommy Connors and Charlie Morgan especially. And I remember Coach Sells talking to these, my friends after a match, and Jack would say things like, do you remember when you went for the full Nelson, what you did? And the really good wrestlers couldn't remember it. Or, do you remember when the guy went for a double takedown, what you did? And they would say, no, I don't remember what I did. They didn't remember because they were just wrestling by instinct. They had wrestled so much, they were so good at it, that it was second nature. They didn't think of it. And that's true for any activity that somebody's good at. They almost do it by second nature. They're in their zone and they can just do it. Well, that's a little bit what the first reading is about today. So let's kind of jump into it. The days are coming, says the Lord. In those days. You know, when that phrase, the days are coming, or those days, or the days of the Lord, is heard, it means a special time, not an ordinary time, an extraordinary time. It means God's time. Okay? So something big is happening here. So in those days, says the Lord, when I make a new covenant with the house of Israel and the house of Judah. Like I said in the introduction, one time explicitly mentioned there is a new covenant coming. The house of Israel were the 10 northern tribes. The house of Judah were the 2 southern tribes. So the 12 tribes of Israel, God is going to make a new covenant with them. It's not going to be like the covenant I made with them when I took them by the hand and led them out of Egypt. That's really it's a tender image that God goes and takes the hand of his chosen people and leads them out of Egypt. God says, because they broke my covenant. In this new covenant, they're not going to break my covenant. And because they broke the law I gave them, I had to be their master. It's almost like God said, I was forced into kind of punishing them and condemning them so they didn't do it again. Then he says, but this is the new covenant that I will make one day with my children. I will place my law within them, in their hearts. Okay, so this is what's happening. In the first covenant, God had his law written on 2 stone tablets. And Moses came down from Mount Sinai and gave the law to the Jewish people. But the law remained outside of them. God says, this is what's going to happen now. I'm going to place my law in their hearts. I'm going to write the law not on stone tablets, but on tablets of flesh in their heart. This is Isaiah the prophet's attempt to say that in the new covenant, God's law is going to be internalized. It's going to become second nature to us, which wrestling never did become second nature or instinctual to me. So God says, I will place my law in their hearts. I will be their God, and they shall be my people. No longer will they need to teach their friends and relatives how to know me. They will just be able to know me because I have revealed myself in a new way, in a completely unprecedented way. Something new is going to be happening. And we believe that new thing is called Jesus Christ. That God revealed through Jesus Christ a completely new way to be in a relationship with him, to be in a covenant with him. And as I said a little while ago, a covenant is a sacred pact. It's a pact between God and us. So, this is what we're looking forward to in the person of Jesus Christ when he finally comes. And this new covenant, this new way of being in relationship with God is finally achieved in Jesus' life, death, and resurrection. So, God bless you. Come back tomorrow. We'll take a look at the psalm from this past Sunday's Mass.